Hey, it's Pens Overtime on National Hockey Now YouTube and also the Pittsburgh Hockey Now Facebook page. I'm Matt Gajtka, and that was certainly a lot of stress for game number 5 out of 82, wasn't it? But in the end, it was the good kind of stress as the Penguins come back from a couple of different deficits, including one in the third period, to beat Buffalo 6-5 in overtime. Evgeny Malkin scores his 500th career goal. Sidney Crosby notches not just his career 1,600th point, making him officially in the top 10 in scoring in NHL history. But also, he gets the game winner off a pass from Erik Karlsson on a 4-on-3 power play in overtime. Thank you for joining me. Different backdrop, different look for this show today. Hope that satisfies everyone who was annoyed or distracted by the insulation in my basement ceiling. Anyway, good to be back with you again, our second show of the week. And second time in 3 days, the Penguins come from behind to pick up 2 points. This time they do surrender a point to Buffalo. But in the end, when you're down 5-4 with a minute to go, you'll take whatever kind of win you can get. So the Penguins do get to OT, and unlike the last couple of years, they do succeed in overtime with the help of a Tage Thompson tripping penalty on Evgeny Malkin. Malkin, like I mentioned, scored his 500th career goal. That was earlier in the third. That gave the Pens a 4-3 lead. They came back from 2-0 and 3-1 down with the help of their rookie goalie, Joel Blomqvist, and more on him a little bit later. But he stopped the first 20 shots he faced. Still, the Sabres came back and took another lead in the third. It looked like it was going to be Buffalo's night in the end, even though it was Gino's night on an individual basis. But the Pens have some pushback. Malkin's slap shot trickles through Sabres goalie Ukko-Pekka Luukkonen in the final minute of the third period, and the rebound is deposited by Rickard Rakell into an empty net. So the Penguins get a shorthanded 3-on-4 goal. They get a power play goal, traditional 5-on-4. They get also the 4-on-3 overtime goal, and they get a 6-on-5 goal. So out of the 6 they scored, just 2 were 5-on-5. But those were rather pretty, as we had Jesse Puljujärvi scoring his first of the year on a brilliant little stutter step backhand move, you want to call it that, hesitation move at the front of the net. And Malkin's, even though it was just after a power play, felt like a power play, that was even strength. He scored that on his back as he just swatted at the loose puck after Luukkonen stopped him the initial time. So a lot going on. Please join in. Send us your comments. Send me your comments. Send stars on Facebook if you are watching there. Give us a like and a follow on YouTube as well. NES Addict, always one of the first ones in. Says a wild one tonight, and glad they won, but why did it have to be such a nail-biter? Not invoking or improving my confidence in Jarry. And Tristan Jarry is certainly a big part of the story tonight on the negative side. Win or lose, the Penguins have a problem in goal, and his name is Tristan Jarry. He wears number 35. Perhaps you know him. After I gave him a lot of credit in the third period of the Montreal win a couple of nights ago, I thought he was rock solid there, helping the Penguins to rally back and eventually take that one 6-3 on the road. This time around, totally nonchalant, looked disinterested after he turned the puck over behind the net in the opening minute of this game. Barely tried to get back to his post, didn't go down to the butterfly, just let the Sabres jam it in behind him. And from there, things got worse for the Penguins as Jarry allowed a second goal scored by Jordan Greenway. That one, the result of a rush. J.J. Peterka also off the rush. Peterka's goal was a pretty good shot, but at the same time, that first goal allowed, Tage Thompson ended up getting it, by the way, for Buffalo. That set the tone for a rough night for Jarry, who gave up 3 goals on 5 shots. Mike Sullivan saw enough after 11 minutes and 33 seconds. And it was Blomqvist's net from there. And he made 2 breakaway saves, did Blomqvist, bailing out Erik Karlsson as he continued to bobble and mishandle the puck all night long, until the very end, of course. But Karlsson had a very wretched night with the puck through regulation time. Blomqvist, though, saved a couple of goals in that second period. Then Drew O'Connor scores as the Sabres got sloppy on a 4-on-3 power play in the second. And O'Connor converted after a lengthy offside review. I thought it was the right call. I thought Ochari's position on the play was irrelevant to the goal anyway, but I digress. I don't think offside review was designed for that sort of scrutiny, that close of a call. And then I mentioned Puljujärvi with the tying goal. He continues to impress. That third line continues to get the job done as well. Let's look at some comments. Jay Moreau says, love PHN. Hey, we'll throw that up on the screen. Thanks for the content after every game. Good to be back with you. Of course, Dan Kingerski is on site. He's got the written content and maybe a video later. Who knows? As the Penguins start a 2-game homestand with a rousing victory in front of a very appreciative crowd. Awesome to see Malkin do it at home as well. The Penguins poured off the bench when he got his 500th goal. And it was a significant moment of the game, too. So it all added up. And but no sooner did the Penguins take the lead and have that celebration that the Sabres looked like they were going to steal that. Brad says it gave flashbacks to when the Penn Stars had less gray in their hair. Yeah, when it seemed like any deficit was overcomable. And I said it when it was 3-1, or heck, when it was 2-0. The Sabres have been a fragile bunch. Even 2 years ago when they made a decent run and they were a high-scoring team, they have always been, not always, not in the history of the Sabres. There have been some good Sabres teams. It's hard to remember that at this point, but there have been. But ever since the tank for McDavid and Eichel back in, 2015, the Sabres have been the kind of team that you can do this to. And apparently that trend continues on even into 2024-25. Early on in the season, the Sabres dropped to 1-3-1 with that loss. They just beat the Florida Panthers the other night at home for their first victory of the season, but they're right back into the L column, even though they did get a point. It's one of those games coming in, I was thinking, this is one of those nights that's going to tell us, is this season going to be any different? At least give us a little bit of a hint when it comes to the Sabres. And for a while, it looked like, hey, maybe this is that young up-and-coming team that we thought we saw 2 years ago that we thought was going to ascend into playoff contention. But the Penguins pushed back, and the Penguins show that they still have some staying power, even though, like Brad mentioned, they have a few more gray hairs in their beards and on their heads. Ricard Raquel getting going early, as Mike Savoy notes on YouTube. Thanks for the comment, Mike. And the Rotten Egg notes Blomqvist. You know what I like about Blomqvist is, I think it was mentioned on the broadcast too on TNT. It might have been Shane Knighty or perhaps Jody Shelley, one of the two analysts, but talking about how he keeps his arms close to his body. You know what? It was actually Henrik Lundqvist at the intermission report. He would know, right? But it's such a good look for a young goalie who really finished on a down note for AHL, Wilkes-Barre Scranton last year. He was good in the middle of the year, but perhaps wore down a little bit into the playoffs. Didn't have a good playoff there as the Baby Pens were bounced in the first round. I mentioned Dan Kingerski. He was there to take a look at him in the playoffs in addition to midseason, and he said Blomqvist was a different goalie at midseason. We're seeing that midseason from last year, Joel Blomqvist, and it is exciting to see a legitimate goalie prospect in the Penguin system for the first time since Tristan Jarry was coming up back in 2017-18. And for me, I think you give Blomqvist the starter's net from at least here on out until, I don't know, give him a couple of weeks. We've got a Western Canada trip coming up, so you'll have to play Jarry, I would imagine, at least one of those games. But I would give the majority of the starts, maybe 2 out of 3, to Blomqvist for the next couple of weeks and see where that goes, because I don't think you have anything to lose right now. It seems like Jarry is mentally out to lunch in a lot of ways. I think he has a bit of a mental block at home as well. I think he's gotten used to playing poorly there, and it's become a habit. And I think that he's a bit rattled by the fans turning on him, but for good reason. I'm not going to blame the fans for getting upset, especially after you allow a goal like the one that Jarry did to start this game. It's just not where you want to go. You come off a successful trip. As Mike Sullivan said, they won the trip. They went 2-1, and you come back home and your goalie doesn't look like he's ready to play. It's really disappointing. Not all good tonight. Brian gets to a point I was going to get to as well. He finds it frustrating that this extremely veteran team has irresponsible play with the puck, I would say. I would add to that, particularly by Karlsson and Letang. Karlsson looked like he was either still injured or still really rusty, but although he had a good game at Montreal, so I'm kind of confused where that game came from. He forgot how to catch and make a pass tonight. It was rather ridiculous. And he notes that Letang was playing responsible hockey pre-Karlsson. Maybe you're saying it's rubbing off a little bit. Letang wasn't great tonight as well. He got beaten a couple of times, but for me, Karlsson was the main culprit and continues to be disappointing, whether it's mental mistakes or physical mistakes. Tonight it was more the latter, where pucks were bouncing over his stick. That last play, I thought it was going to doom the Penguins, that he couldn't make at the blue line. Maybe you'll recall it with the extra attacker with about 1:30 left. perfect pass right on his tape out by the blue line, and he just flubs it. It goes right under his blade, and he's got to go retreat and get it. And he was fortunate that he wasn't called for icing there on the dump in, and the Penguins, of course, end up scoring about 30 seconds later. So, yeah, a lot of minuses to hand out, not just literally, but also metaphorically this evening. Looking at some of the advanced stats, it finished 6-5, so you'd think it was a close game. It was a very close game in terms of game flow as well. Unblocked shot attempts, a.k.a. Corsi. The Penguins had a slight advantage there, 52%. Same deal in shots on goal. Scoring chances split right down the middle, 50-50, according to Natural Stat Trick. The Pens had a couple more high danger chances and a little bit more in the expected goals category. But overall, the Sabres went toe-to-toe with them. And like I said, I still feel like the Sabres team should be making a move at some point up the standings. But that Atlantic Division continues to be stagnant, where you've got teams like the Sabres, like the Red Wings we saw a couple of nights ago, like the Sens and the Canadiens, that just can't make that jump. And I think a lot of it comes down to defending in details. And the Sabres were just as sloppy as the Penguins tonight. And that's why we saw the 6-5 final. A little bit of October hockey, I would say, personified when you look at how the teams handled the puck, how they played systematically, and how they couldn't hold on to leads. It looked for a while like the Sabres were going to be able to have the last laugh, but the extra attacker goal bites them in the end. And I think this game deserved overtime. I think both teams didn't deserve a regulation win out of it. In the end, though, the NHL point system being what it is, you still get two for a victory. And for the Penguins, overtime has been a bugaboo for them. Since they started to get a little bit older, a little bit slower, and they have not had the advantage in 3-on-3, but when you make it 4-on-3, that tends to change everything. Although I will note, I'd love to see Crosby take on J.J. Peterka one-on-one early in that overtime. He could have won it if that puck didn't bounce on him as he tried to make that power move to the net. So Sid was a little quiet through the first two periods, but he got the hands going and the feet going in the third period. He could have had an assist to Brian Rust early in the third. You'll recall that behind-the-back play from behind the net, the same one that set up Gino for the goal number 500 a little bit later. Sid did that twice in the third, and like I mentioned, assertive in overtime as well. So Crosby gets a couple of more points. Let's go down the points list. A lot of people in this game got on the board. Sid with 3, a goal and 2 assists. So now what is that? 6 points in 5 games, back on that point-per-game pace. I know you're all worried about that. In the first 2 weeks of the season, Malkin leading all Penguins with 4 points, a goal, and 3 helpers, actually leading all players in the game with a goal and 3 assists. Drew O'Connor and Jesse Puljujarvi each scoring. O'Connor also had an assist. Brian Rust had a goal and an assist. How we forget, Ricard Raquel, another goal, the one that tied it up. He and Rust were right there. One of them was going to put it in, hopefully, and one of them did. Just 1 point from the blue line, Erik Karlsson, the assist on, it must have been the late tying goal. No, actually, excuse me. It was the late winning goal. I was just mentioning that at the start of the show, that he had a wretched night with the puck, did Karlsson, but that pass to Crosby, that was exactly what the situation was calling for. And Karlsson picked up his 3rd assist on the night. Malkin with a secondary assist. He's got 9 assists. Malkin has to be in the league lead for points because he was tied for the league lead coming in with 7. Now he has 11. Yevgeny Malkin at age 38, showing he's got something left. I think these milestones have helped push him a little bit too. That always helps to have something tangible to go for early in the season. But these Penguins should have something tangible to go for throughout the season, considering how the last 2 seasons have ended. Yeah, Leo says 11 points in 5 games is ridiculous. Jamie Komet, good friend, he adds that nice to see Puljujarvi fully healthy and playing well. The funny thing about Puljujarvi, I mentioned him in the previous post-game show after the Montreal game. I thought he was great then. I said never take him out of the lineup. Looks like his hips are all set to go after the offseason surgery 2 summers ago. And, I quoted myself on Twitter X and on Facebook in sharing the link to the show on Monday, and immediately got a retweet from someone who was speaking all Finnish, and then I got a couple of followers from 2 people who look like they have Finnish names. So Puljujarvi's got a healthy social media fan club. And if you want some free follows, go ahead and say something nice about him. But it's no stretch to say he's one of the Penguins' best forwards through 5 games as they improve to 3-2. Chris Perrell says Jarry is starting to look like Jack Campbell. Campbell didn't quite have the level of success at the NHL level that Jarry has had. What is Jarry? A 2-time All-Star, I think, at this point. Jack Campbell wasn't quite there, but yeah, the fall-off was significant for Campbell. I think he's actually on leave right now. I think he's in the player assistance program, so hoping for the best for him. He was a former star internationally for the USA at the junior level and a high draft pick, and then he had a big season for the Leafs, went to the Oilers, and he has been in the AHL for the last couple of seasons. Savoy wants to move DOC up to the first line. And another comment from him, first line needs a jolt. You could be right there. I'm starting to look at that first line and say it could use some more variety. That third line has a lot of reach, doesn't it? O'Connor, Puljujärvi, who's deceptively tall, and also Lars Eller, all well over 6 feet. But maybe we could use some of that size up with Crosby, because at even strength, there hasn't been a lot of production from the first line. Brian asks if there's any update on Blake Lizotte, and I have not seen anything there. Remember, he is another part of that bottom six depth brigade that GM or president of hockey ops, Kyle Dubas brought in the offseason. Michael Collins lauding a great team victory. One of those ugly but pretty wins in that you want to see your team fight through adversity. The Pens did it 2 nights ago in Montreal. They were trailing there after leading early. And I guess a continued theme in some ways, because the Penguins did close well in this game. Well, at the very end they did. They ended up, tying the Sabres 2-2 in the third, but then they get the overtime goal as well. So, hey, there are worse traits to have than being closers. I don't care if you're talking about hockey or baseball or whatever else. Christopher might be a late joiner to the party here, because I said that I would have Blomqvist start 2 out of the next 3 at least. Oh, but he's saying when Nedeljkovic is back. Well, that's the real question, isn't it? And I think a lot of that depends on what we see from Blomqvist. If he gets another look here, I would start him on Friday at minimum against the Hurricanes before the Pens go out north and west. The problem is the salary cap. The problem is waivers and all of that. Obviously, I think the Penguins would hope if they put Jarry on waivers. I'm not saying we're quite to that point, but if they did do that, they would hope another team would pick him up. But that would be a tough ask, even though there are some teams out there looking for goaltending. Hello, Edmonton. Maybe Stuart Skinner isn't the panacea that you were looking for. And there are other teams as well who have struggled in getting some stops. The Penguins are one of those teams, honestly, but they have improved to 3-2. Christopher also says, shout out to Graves, been playing well. I thought he was fine tonight. Yeah, I still find myself wanting more from him, but maybe I shouldn't. Maybe I should be glad when he has a quiet night, or a relatively quiet night, that he's just going back, retrieving pucks, and making the simple plays, because otherwise, I think when he is more evident, he might be overextending himself and having some trouble there. All right, Brian. Second line playing great. Yeah, I think Bunting's fitting in quite well. Is Beauvillier along for the first line? That's the question. If you want to make a change on the top line, is Beauvillier coming off? I guess so, because Brian Rust and Sidney Crosby do have the chemistry that we've seen over the many years, and we saw it again tonight. Rust getting a goal off a sit assist and could have had another one. So, yeah, I bet it would be Beauvillier if Sullivan decides to try to shake things up. But the Penguins have won 3 out of 4 here after losing the opener in ugly fashion. They've had to outscore their opponents when they've been winning these games. 6 goals against the Red Wings, 6 goals against the Canadiens, and 6 more goals, and they needed every one of them tonight against the Buffalo Sabres. So it's old school Penguins hockey in that way, right? Outscore your problems. And as someone mentioned on Twitter tonight, forget who it was, might have been Chris Mack, but the Penguins might not be anywhere near a cup contender at this point. I think that is something we can all agree on, but they still have their moments, and they still have nights like tonight where they have Sidney Crosby and Evgeny Malkin, and you don't. And that's what developed at the end of that game. That's exactly how it finished up on the aggregate, although we took several twists and turns along the way. All right, a few more minutes here. Let's look at some more comments. Brian asked if Jarry goes on waivers and he gets picked up, Are the Pens off the hook for his entire salary? Well, yes, they would be. That would be a team really believing in Tristan Jarry at this point. That's all you have to know about that. If a team selects a player off waivers, he's gone. He's off your payroll. You don't have to worry about it. Now, a trade, maybe you could work something out where you retain a little bit of salary or a lot of salary to make it work. That was added to the NHL protocol a few years back, and I think it's a good addition. It does facilitate more player movement. I think anything's on the table right now because I think Jarry, if not being cooked totally as an NHL player, I think as a Penguin, it might be better off for both parties if the Penguins decide to move on. But they do have Nedeljkovic in net. He's still in his fourth or fifth NHL season. He's been very inconsistent. You have a true rookie in Joel Blomqvist, who as recently as last April was looking pretty rough at the AHL level, but he has started well, and the Penguins have ridden rookie goalies in their history to great success. Patrick Lalime comes to mind in the regular season. Johan Hedberg comes to mind in the playoffs, of course, and I saw at least one comparison of Blomqvist to Hedberg, and not just because they're both Scandinavian, but also because they seemingly come out of nowhere and might be able to rescue the situation. This would be a different situation at the start of the year compared to the end, but I was amused by that as someone who was a very young hockey fan. When the Moose came on the scene, that was a very exciting time in Penguins history. Not a Pens question. Not sure if I missed it somewhere, but very glad to. I don't even know what that's in reference to, Brad. Can you finish your question because you cut yourself off? Anyway, like I mentioned, Dan Kingerski's got the coverage from PPG Paints Arena. I guess we could look at some out-of-town scores if you want to. Let's do that. I haven't done that the first couple of shows. Leafs up 5-2 on the Kings. Avalanche, no wins on the year. They're 0-0 with the Boston Bruins. And we've got Utah trying to bounce back from its first loss. That's been a fun team to watch. Speaking of a team that's outscoring its problems, the Utah Hockey Club might interest you. Could be your Western Conference team. I think they become mine already. Kind of fell in love with them in that first game with a great crowd at Delta Center, and then even more so when they rallied back to beat the Rangers. That was also beneficial to the Penguins too. Utah plays at the Ducks tonight at 10 o'clock. So there you go, just the 4 games in all on this Wednesday. And the Pens and Sabres certainly gave a national TV audience on TNT. Quite the show, didn't they? Like I was saying, it's your prototypical early season game. We've seen a lot of goals going in. We've seen goalies, as has tended to be the trend over the past 10 years, goalies starting slow. We have some teams with save percentages under 700, or under 800, I should say, in the 700s as a team. That's wild to me. And the Penguins might actually be kind of close. Okay, Brian, you finished up the question here. You said, can we safely say that Hextall was terrible and nothing but a detriment to this club? Depends on how you feel about the Malkin and Letang extensions. I was in on Malkin. Let me put it this way. I was in on doing one out of the 2 extensions. And I think I was more in on Letang because I felt like the Pens needed something on the blue line to be an anchor along with Crosby up front. But the way the 2 have played, maybe Malkin was the smarter pick. In the end, I think Hextall had his hands tied there. The extension for Rickard Rakell, probably a mistake you don't need to make. But I have also said that I like Rakell, and I think last year was a fluke, partially due to injuries. So I think overall in the negative, Ron Hextall, and I think he left quite a mess there for Kyle Dubas. Dubas had a rough first summer, if you look at the results. Second summer, of course, we do withhold judgment because we're just getting started. But maybe Beauvillier works out. Maybe Kevin Hayes works out. I've liked his play to this point. Cody Glass, Blake Lizotte. Jesse Puljujarvi was more of a 2 seasons ago thing. Michael Bunting was last season. I think he's been a good fit, and they made the best of a situation where Jake Gensel was most likely going to walk. So these things are complicated. So I'm not going to bury Ron Hextall like some have, because I think to a certain extent the contract extensions he signed were out of his hands to the big boys. I'm talking about Letang and Malkin. And you could say the Pens would be in a better position if they weren't tied down there. But it was also the case where he was facing an aging core, and Rutherford left in a huff. So that wasn't the best situation for Hextall to come into on top of all that. So hard to answer that question one way or another. So I guess I wouldn't say without question that Hextall was terrible, but certainly continued the downward trajectory without halting it, as the Penguins have drifted further and further from Cup contention. Oh, Brad, you say not a question, but glad to be getting Pens recaps. Love your insight. Thank you very much. I love talking after the games, especially after exciting ones like this. Even if they would have lost that game, there was certainly a lot to discuss. And like I mentioned, weekends are kind of tough for me, so I try to take advantage of these weekdays to speak with you. One last comment from Christopher, who's been awesome tonight, going back and forth. He says, we're beating teams that might be in the wild card race with us. That is very much the case. 3 wins against Atlantic Division foes, who I mentioned are trying to be those teams that jump up. I'm not sure they're going to get there, because compare what the Pens have done against the teams they've beaten here so far, Detroit, Montreal, Buffalo. Compare them to, say, the Rangers, or to a lesser extent, the Leafs the other night. The Pens had a much easier time of generating offense against these teams they've beaten, and I think that's the difference. I think it comes down to defending, and I think these teams are still not quite ready for prime time. So credit to the Pens for taking advantage of that. All right, we're going to say goodbye here. I'm going to say goodbye to you. I'm forcing you to say goodbye, but thank you for joining me from a different room in my basement this time. We've got the fancy Pittsburgh Sports Live backdrop, and thank you to Dan Kingerski for the tech support, getting me on the YouTube page, as well as the Facebook page, Pittsburgh Hockey Now, National Hockey Now. Throw us a like, a follow, a star on Facebook. You can do that too. I guess that helps. On top of that, I'm not quite sure how that works, but I'm told to say that as well. All right, Friday, you're on your own. I've got high school football broadcasting to do, so I'll be following the Pens and Canes, hoping for a couple of broadcasts from the West Coast. Actually, I'm going to be in San Diego next week, so very convenient for me. I'll be able to watch those games out west at a reasonable hour. So we've got the Jets on Sunday, and I believe it's the Calgary Flames on Tuesday before the Oilers and the Canucks 2 weekends from now. So that's what's ahead. Look for notifications from me on social media, as I'll show you my handle once more there in the bottom corner of the screen. I'm on X. I'm on Facebook. Like I mentioned, a little bit on Instagram, but follow me on X and Facebook. Most notably, most importantly, that's where I'll continue to share this content, these Penguins overtime shows, as the Pens beat Buffalo 6-5. Gino gets 500. Sid gets his 1,600, and the game winner. And the Penguins pull one out that maybe they shouldn't have. But then again, maybe they should have. Who am I to make judgment calls on that? In the end, I guess the puck don't lie. And the Penguins are back above 500. Talk to you next time on Pens Overtime.